Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah. I love talking about Squarespace SEO, which apparently normal people don't find to be an exciting conversation. I just find that so confusing. Um, anyway, so I hope you're here because you think that's an exciting conversation as well. I don't have slides or what have you for you. I think we kind of slideshow people till they kind of glaze over and it kind of becomes talking at people instead of with people or to people. And so trying to use fewer slides in my presentations. And this is pretty informal. So as I said, if you got my emails about this, you also are super welcome. If you're like, hey, Sarah, I have a burning Squarespace SEO question, I will answer that. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm sorry, that's covered in the course. You cannot ask that question because that's just not how I roll. So please ask a question. There is a little box if you're on the web. There is a little box in the browser that is kind of like light gray on black that has a question mark. It's the second one down. That will actually be, if you put a question in there, what's really cool is you can actually come back and find that question. So if you can't stay the whole time, you can find that question and it'll like fast forward straight to that question, which is pretty cool. So that also should be handy for you. Anyway, so welcome. Uh and I want to talk to you about, and I'll get to any questions you have. I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the stuff that I am seeing right now. I get a lot of like my clients often tell me what they have been pitched, what they've heard, things they've seen on their professional groups. That's a biggie. I know we've got quite a few web designers who've enrolled in this course or who have been interested in this course. So you may hear this stuff too, if they're in professional groups and what have you. So that's something definitely to keep in, to just kind of know, like I keep my ear to the ground about what people are hearing about Squarespace. So what I sort of feel like it's like New Year's, same song. Like this year, I've heard a lot of the same stuff as I heard last year and the year before and the year before and the year before about what's going on with Squarespace and its visibility in search. And before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about what I mean when I say SEO. That stands for search engine optimization. And there are so many different ways people search for information on the internet. Obviously, the biggie is Google, that still to this day, it has not lost market share. There are actually more Google searches than ever before. Google has gone up actually in their search volume, which I think is really interesting. And I have a whole lot of theories about that. Um, so people search in Google, they search in Bing, they search using generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, what have you. There's a million of them all being like rolled out. Those are all effectively searches. And all of those tools, whether they're talking Google or, a niche chatbot, they're all using information that is available on the internet. They're pulling it into whatever way they display their output and displaying it to the searcher. And so conceptually, it's effectively the same thing. And so this is one of the things I have been dealing with a lot this year is people thinking that searches are very, very different now. And it's really not true. We still see over 90% of online experiences start with a search. We still see people typing in, how do I, this versus that, what is, like all of these same phraseologies and behaviors and what have you haven't changed. The paths can be a little bit fuzzier, but really the actual machinations are not different. They may be using different software, but they're not different. And something else to keep in mind, and again, because I know I've got web designers who are interested in this stuff in particular. So for those of you who are just regular website owners, apologies. Um, what I have seen is a lot of web designers are being told by clients that they need to be using a different techniques to create visibility in these alternative search tools. And that's simply not true. In fact, if you're doing really solid foundational SEO, whether it's on a Squarespace site or some other platform, you're probably doing pretty great with those alternative search tools. So I wanted to say all that. I feel like that's this big sort of elephant like over here that people worry about. And there's a lot of folks, I'm going to point at Threads in particular, who are effectively spouting disinformation about how people are searching that is not based in data, not based in research, not based in facts, about radical changes in search behaviors. And that's not supported by data. So off my high horse about that. So let's talk about what I'm hearing in terms of Squarespace specifically. So there's a lot of stuff generally about search in general, but let's get more into the Squarespacey stuff that I have been hearing. And here are some of the limitations. I will tell you, some of this came straight from an email that got forwarded to me. One of the things that I have been told, and that clients of mine are hearing, is that the backend coding of Squarespace will prohibit you from performing well in Google. This is not true. This is straight up a myth. I've got loads of clients who can show you their stats, but there are some limitations of backend code. For example, you cannot alter the code in Squarespace to make elements load in a different order, which you can do with some website platforms. Okay, so we know that. Cool. The vast majority of regular old businesses, we're talking local businesses, consulting businesses, doctors' offices, even, e-commerce, most of them don't need to do that kind of heavy lift and code alteration in order to perform well in the search engine. And so that is not something I find particularly limiting or concerning, but that is something that we see people push back who are trying, especially folks who are trying to get our clients to move to different platforms. The other thing that is the upside of that unalterable backend code, is that we also have reduced the chances of security breaches, hacking, malware. Those things actually do affect your Google rankings. I say this as someone who used to have a WordPress site. My site got malware that was really bad. It actually specifically targeted the mobile view, which, that is what Google indexes first. And it caused me some serious problems. It was actually the impetus for me going back to a closed platform like Squarespace. So when we talk about these limitations in terms of the code, there are also some benefits, because not getting malware, one, is like a real stress reduction, like ask me how I know. But also, if you are having malware that, say, attacks the mobile version of your website, that is a huge SEO problem, because that means Google can't properly index your website. That's something that I do think is we don't talk enough about. And the answers that we need to be prepared with answers when people criticize the platform in that way. And I am a Squarespace critic, just to be clear. I am annoying to their customer support. So secondly, one of the limitations that people often talk to me about is there's something called Nofollow links. And again, those of you who are web designers, you probably know what that means. For those of you who are lay people, Nofollow links are a kind of way of adding a link to your website that is says to the internet, hey, I'm linking to this, but don't include this as part of my website architecture. Don't donate this link over to this other website or this other page on my site. And that can, particularly when it's internal links, so that's links on your website, that can cause some problems. There's no native way to do that in Squarespace, which that is one of the things that I kind of needle Squarespace about. Once a year, I'll send me like, hey, are you going to fix that Nofollow issue? And they're like, it's been added to our request queue. Never going to fix it. So that is an issue. And this can create some problems. I cover this in Squarespace SEO Hacks. It is a little bit funky. But my pro tip is that if you are linking to a page on your website that is not indexed, so those of you who are web designers will know this, what I mean by this, you can add a little fancy code stuff to make that page, that link, a Nofollow link and solve the problem. Also, it's not the end of the world if you forget to do that. Like an incorrect do follow link, so that means, hey, include this as an index, that's not going to tank your SEO unless you have a bunch of other problems. So this is all cumulative. And that's the thing that I think sometimes, we'll get folks focused on. I'm going to jump ahead to one of my other points. We'll have people criticize the speed of Squarespace. It is not the fastest platform. It's also not as slow as Show It. I like to roast Show It a little bit. It's not the fastest. Having not the fastest website is not going to tank your SEO. It will if you have a whole bunch of other problems, if your headings aren't correct, if you have duplicate content, if you have lots of broken links, if you have lots of 404 errors, and your site is slow, that's a big problem. We need to fix that. But having your site be moderately fast, which is what most of the Squarespace websites I work on are reasonably fast. Like some of them are faster than WordPress sites. So you're fine. Like that's my takeaway is you're fine. Another thing that we see a lot is duplicate content issues in Squarespace. This is super fixable. This is one of those things where I have definitely had clients who DIY'd their websites. They've been approached by sketchy SEO bros and they have been told you have all this duplicate content. And they'll actually reach out to me, maybe book a strategy session or what have you. I'll be like, oh, we can fix that with a click because it's always the blog categories and tags. Easy fix. So a lot of, again, these things that people kind of alarm about Squarespace and their visibility and search, it's like, this fix, we just tick a box. Like, I think we can all do that, right? And another one that I wanted, and if you follow me on Instagram, you probably heard me talk about this one. There are some Google Core Vitals issues. So again, this is something, if you're just a website owner, you're like, what is Google Core Vitals? This is one of the many measurements Google uses to look at the visitor experience, the user experience on your website. They use some really weird words for this, like largest contentful paint. I swear, like the people working at Google have never talked to a real person. And what I tell people is that 7.1, so the newer version of Squarespace, has vastly improved Google Core Vitals performance. Vastly. I've run tests. I actually did a test before I helped a client with a whole bunch of stuff earlier this year. And we had a before and after, and it was quite surprising the difference in Core Vital scores. But the other thing is the biggie is, and I said this on Instagram the other day, turn off universal animations. Your Core Vital score will go up. That's, again, take a box. That is an easy solution to improving your visibility in Google and your user experience. Like that is a solvable problem. And then the last thing, and this is again one that I see a lot because people, especially what people who've DIY'd your website. So no shade to you if you DIY'd your website. That is an appropriate course of action for a lot of people, especially when you're starting a business. The way the templates that Squarespace themselves present, a lot of times have incorrect heading structures. So that means your headline. So your big headline, your medium headline, your smallish headline, your super small headline. Those have oftentimes in the demo templates, they use headlines for decorative purposes. That is an inappropriate use of a headline. And so we'll see a lot of Squarespace sites have this problem over and over again because folks have simply followed the template. Because why would you know? There's no thing when you go to select header 1 that's like, warning, this is actually super important for Google to understand what your website is about. Again, solvable problem. It can be a little bit of wrestling if you've got a whole design system that's built incorrectly, but it's actually quite solvable. So those are the biggies that I'm seeing in terms of objections to Squarespace. And that's something I really want, again, especially those of you who are web designers, I want you to be armed with that information so that you can provide pushback if your clients get, nervous or they get one of those scary emails or what have you. I want you to be able to say, hey, actually, these are all super solvable problems. Or, none of these individual things are actual ranking factors. And overall, we're doing pretty well. That kind of thing. So, or we look cumulatively at the overall site performance or balancing brand strategy, site performance, SEO, marketing strategy. Like they're all parts of a whole ecosystem. So that's something I really want you all to be able to kind of push back on. And the other thing is I really see a lot of the people who choose this particular platform, because I work across platforms except for Show It. I will not touch that platform. I work across platforms. People usually choose their website platform for a reason. And a lot of the businesses who choose Squarespace, they don't have the capacity to have a developer on retainer. They don't have someone in-house who can be managing their website. They're choosing this because they want simplicity and they want ease and they want their marketing department to be able to easily update copy, or they're a solopreneur who wants to be able to easily update copy or change photos on their own. They want the ease of use. And that is actually just as important a decision as oh, but can't crack open the code. So that's something I really want people to keep in mind, is that these decisions are not made in this like sort of tunnel vision. We want to make these decisions in a big picture way. So Alyssa said, I feel like most of the weird Squarespace things are things that websites things that designers should be doing. Designers are doing that they shouldn't be doing. Yes, that's also true. Like, again, the vast majority of website, like the header structure, like you shouldn't be using a header one to say, hey girl, like you shouldn't do that. And that's something that, again, like I understand that a lot of designers aren't versed in SEO, but that is a basic or fundamental design skill that you should be aware of what these different elements do. And that is the downside of, I will say, the sort of turnkey platforms like Squarespace, like Wix. I would say Elementor and Divi also, which are WordPress tools, also fall into that, where you can ignore, like it's easier to ignore that stuff because you're not working with the code as much. And so that's just, it's a thing that I think everyone who's working on websites needs to kind of be like, okay, what do the headers do? Oh, yeah, when I upload an image, I should compress that in short pixel first. And I should make sure I add alt text because that's good for accessibility, very good for accessibility. It's also important for SEO, so Google understands how these images play a role in the overall content. Those are all things that we should be doing. And it's easy to get a little lax because these platforms like Squarespace, like Wix, like some of the turnkey WordPress builders, it's easy to get a little lax and forget that because they are so, I wouldn't say easy, but they are relatively approachable in terms of using them. All right. Oh, Alyssa has a great question. I'm hearing a lot about no-click search and what needs to be done differently to get people to click on your website instead of just reading the answer snippets that Google shows. I have so much to say about this. This is actually one of my favorite subjects. If you want to read a really good article that's not from me about zero-click search, Google zero-click search, and I'll try to pull it up as well, zero-click search and SparkToro, which is an app that's really useful if you're doing audience research. I think this is very real. My take on this. So the concept is, actually, I'm going to rewind because I just realized not everyone knows what zero-click search is or no-click search. They're kind of used interchangeably. This is the idea that people are searching for something and they're skimming and getting the answer and not clicking through on a website. And this is a very real phenomenon. It's actually been going on way before the AI summaries that Google shoved into the top of the search engine results pages. It really started with the featured snippets. Just an aside, if you don't know what a featured snippet is, it's a snippet from website content that answers the searcher's question. Those used to be up where the AI answers are now. Those used to be up there. What's interesting is for super niche searches, you're still seeing those. So to me, it also makes a compelling case for doing some pretty niched content on your website because they seem to circumvent the AI, because it's like there's not enough information for the AI to generate. Like there's not enough stuff for it to mash everything together, put it in the blender and spit it back out. So to me, it's kind of a sneaky way to be able to get in ahead of the AI summaries. Just a fun aside. I've really come to peace over the last few years because this has been going on for several years with the issue of like zero click, because the way I have been thinking about this is any brand exposure. And Alyssa, I know you're a brand designer, so this is probably like very resonant with the way you think about branding. To any like brand exposure to the right person is good. I think we can kind of all agree on that. If someone has a challenge or a question or a problem or wants information and they see your name and your site either in like an AI summary at the top or in the search engine results pages, and maybe they don't click, but they kind of register that name. They maybe see your little favicon in the search engine. Favicon is the little icon in your browser, just for non-techie folks. If they see that in their search and result pages and they see it over and over and over again, that is actually brand building and brand awareness. And I have a little story about that. I love to tell stories. I had someone, I think it was last year. I've lost track of time. Like, what is time? I have lost track of time, but I think it was last year. And I had someone say they booked a strategy session after these 1-hour-long strategy session. They booked a strategy session with me. And I always ask people, like, oh, so, how did you, if I see someone hasn't really been on my mailing list, they haven't followed me on social media, like we've had no connection, like, oh, how did you find me? And she's like, oh, well, I was Googling. This person was an executive coach. I was Googling, and every time I Google, your name would pop up somewhere in the results. So finally, after like 7 searches, I just clicked through and booked this session. And I thought that was such an interesting, and again, that's anecdotes, like anecdata is not real data, but it was such an interesting thing to hear from someone. And she rattled off that she had seen a video that I'd made. She'd seen an article pulled out in like a little summary with the meta descriptions. She'd seen my name over and over again with my little, at the time, mint green icon. And that happens a lot. So I think what we need to be aware of is, I'm actually going to drop a link to my last newsletter, is that attribution. So being like, this action, this revenue, this lead, this download came because of X marketing activity. That is actually a little bit of a risky assumption these days, because people are having way more interactions with our brand before they're ever coming to our website. And that's something, just, I think, especially if we look at people who rely on tools like ChatGPT. Again, anecdata, I had a conversation with someone probably last month who found me via ChatGPT. And apparently ChatGPT kept linking to different blog posts of mine in their interaction with the software. And so the person was like, well, I figured I should probably just ask the source. So there's some interesting things. Again, like, how many prompts did that person put in? They didn't remember I asked. I'm shameless. How many prompts did that person put in to that chatbot before actually coming to my website? I think there's a lot. So the reality is that this no-click search or zero-click marketing, I think that we need to answer your specific question, what needs to be done differently? Very niched content. And that sucks. Like, I know that can feel a little bit like, is anybody out there kind of feelings, but it can be something as, so me, I work with a fair amount of people in sort of financial advisory world, but I prefer to only work with CFPs, which is a specific kind of financial advisor. I find them to be really aligned with my thinking. So I have an article not about financial advisors and SEO and content strategy for them. I have an article about that for CFPs, because that is a very specific search. So if someone is a CFP, they're going to have a slightly different intention than someone who's a general financial advisor. So getting super niche with our content. Another thing that I have found, I've been doing this experiment myself, as I do a lot of experiments on myself, is actually thinking, so we've got 2 kinds of content on websites. We have static content that doesn't change a lot. So these are, like, I would say, these are your services pages. Really, those are the really important ones, but also your about page, your contact page, all that. They don't change all that much. Then we've got your dynamic content, which is blog posts, portfolios, things like that. These 2 things work really hand in hand. So we have, on the one hand, the blogs, like that example of targeting CFP, super specific, where other people are more generally targeting financial advisors. But then we've got on our services pages, thinking about doing some more niched services pages. And I'm going to give you an example of one I have. I have on my site, I have woman-owned SEO agency is a page on my site, because what I discovered is a lot of people are searching for that. The click-through rate on that specific page in the search engine, you can get that from Google Search Console. It can spit that out if you want to get super nerdy, is astronomical compared to every other page on my site. And again, what is that page doing? It's a very specific need that page is being filled. Someone is looking for a woman-owned SEO agency. And so I'm walking up, and that's that static type page, and saying, here, this is a page. No one else is, well, there's like one other person. No one else is offering this page about. And I talk about, maybe you've been approached by people who are talking down to you, throwing text speak at you. There's some specific verbiage that I use that is really meeting those people where that has an incredibly high click-through rate. And also the meta description. So that's that little tiny summary underneath the page is again in that tone and speaking to that specific problem. So that ups that conversion rate, gets more people to click. So to me, it's kind of that two-pronged approach. Like, what kind of pages can I create? I have a client who's a very cool auctioneer for benefits, that kind of thing. And one of the things that I've recommended to that person is that we create a page because she does a lot of auctioneering for groups that are working on women's rights, that kind of thing. And so they're looking for a woman auctioneer. Why don't we create a page that showcases some of these clients, that showcases her services for this audience, that we optimize it for that particular search term? I'm really thinking creatively about that, how we can kind of elbow in and serve some of those hyper-focused needs that have a high chance of a high conversion rate. And I don't actually just mean the conversion rate in the click. I also mean the conversion rate in the inquiry as well. So that, like I said, that page that I have has led to a lot of work since I launched it like 6 months ago. And those are the kinds of things you can get really creative with. Alyssa, like, I know you're a designer. Are there specific industry types that you really shine working with? Can you create a services page that specifically addresses the needs of that audience? Like, I know someone who works a lot with architect and engineering firms. They have very specific ways of working. They're challenging to work with in some ways. They're very process oriented. And she has content that is specifically for that audience. And it works very well. So there's some really creative things you can do. And it does create more work, right? Like, that is like, just create a page is not just, there's no just work. You have to write the copy. You have to do that kind of thing. So there's a lot that you can do to kind of leverage the specificity, because if you think about the zero click thing too, if people aren't clicking, yes, sometimes they're getting answers. Sometimes they're not getting an answer. That's the other side of the coin. So what do? They go on Facebook and be like, does anyone know someone who does such and such? So that's the other side of the zero click, is it's not just, oh, they're getting the answers. We need to kind of not assume that, which I know a lot of the articles about zero click do. They also sometimes are like looking, they're like, I don't know. None of this seems helpful. I've definitely come across that on a lot of financial planning related subjects, for example. And so I am going to just a second. I see your comment because I think that's a really good comment, Alyssa. How do I send that to being a question? Just because I want to have this. All right. And then Alyssa said, I thought about that or being city specific. And I guess you'd recommend adjusting most of the text so it's not just copy of the main services page. Yes. You want to make it very customized for the audience. So one of the things I've actually thought about doing a page that's specific about my city, because there's some real weirdness in local search in my city. We have, this is very Portland. We have 6 quadrants. Yes, this does not align. People do not leave their quadrant. It started out, we had northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest, and then we added north and we added south, but we still call them quadrants. And I have thought actually about doing a page on my site that was specific to local folks, because this is one of the things we need to be hyper specific. When I work with, a few local clients, and one of the obstacles in my city is that people in Southeast, for example, will not cross the river over to Southwest. People just will not cross the river. They also won't cross the highway that cuts through the city. And so so for me, like, I can talk about, we get super local. We talk about neighborhoods. Kind of explaining some of the challenges of marketing and SEO for people in Portland, because this is a real challenge. And I bet in Asheville, I bet there's some really interesting local preferences, probably around like handmade, community. You could talk about how Asheville is this really unique, vibrant community full of people working together to build something really special, and how you approach, brand and website design in a really specific way, that because you get Asheville, you understand Asheville. So there's some things you could do, I think, that would be really creative. And I definitely think it's an opportunity, especially if you have a Google business profile and all that stuff, kind of build an ecosystem that's like, hey, I'm the person who knows this community. And you definitely want to make it different than the services page, and definitely more talking about the community. You can kind of use your services page as a framework, obviously, but you want the copy to be different. A fun trick, that's just a little fun pro tip. If you do that, do an update on your Google business profile if you have one that talks about, hey, don't say it like this, say it professionally, but hey, Asheville is a really special community. I've created a new page on my site talking about some of the unique brand opportunities that businesses in Asheville have. You have quite a few characters that you can use in those updates. Add an image that feels very connected to the community, and of course, add the link. And those updates expire in either 90 or 120 days. I can never remember. So that's something you can kind of put in your calendar, your marketing calendar. Just go and do that update fairly regularly, excuse me. And there's a really interesting nexus between the Google business profile. For a long time, Google said, Google business profiles don't actually impact your rankings. And then that Google leak happened in 2024, and it turns out that clicks on your Google business profile do impact your rankings. And so that's something, again, where you could kind of start building that ecosystem. This is my symbol for ecosystem. I hope that works well for everyone. And that's something that would be I think it'd be a quick win. And you could really build some cred in the community. And I'm also wondering, this is something I just had thought, is I wonder if having, for your particular business, I wonder if having a page like that would additionally help with referrals from sort of like related businesses. And I'm thinking, for an example, I actually had a web developer refer a client to me by finding that page I was talking about that I have. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. That I hadn't thought of it as a referral source but it makes sense that maybe if someone was doing digital ads and their client needed a new brand, and they're looking for a local brand designer because they're a local, digital ads. I'm making crap up, of course. I just feel like could be some interesting synergy there, just to help those kind of connected professionals also find you. All right. Yeah, I ordered new glasses so I don't have to do this. They have not come yet. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting, there's a lot of really creative things you can do these days. I really see the zero click as an opportunity. And actually, going back to the topic at hand, because Squarespace is so freaking easy to use, if you have, a good page layout, you can do some of those experiments with creating some of those, I call them affinity pages or interest pages, and see how it works. It's the client I was talking about that, I recommended they add a couple of pages that are of that type. This is actually going to be a pretty big development project for them, because there are WordPress, there's a developer involved and a designer involved, and there's me on the SEO and marketing side. So there's 3 or 4 people just involved in that. And so that's something that I think it's really cool to be able to throw up a page pretty quickly and do that kind of thing. I'm also thinking, honestly, if you're a designer, that could be a really great thing to, also offer to clients. If they kind of are like, what's next with my website? And it's like, hey, have you thought about doing XYZ? And oh man, Alyssa, you asked me the tough question. Do I think there's value to thinking about how to search optimized threads or Instagram posts? Yeah. Okay, I'm actually going to rewind. The social signals thing that people talk about in terms of Google and social signals and that kind of thing, a lot of that is just not accurate. It's not an accurate understanding of how the internet understands all these kind of related profiles of the same company, person, what have you. So, there's me with my website, my YouTube channel, my Instagram account, my Facebook page. Google does like to understand, okay, this is all owned by the same person. So then when we kind of say social signals, that's actually more what is accurate. So I always have to kind of walk that back a little bit. However, with that said, if you have clients or potential clients who are looking for inspiration, guidance, tips, etc., on threads, on Instagram, there is value in optimizing those posts. And I always say I'm not a social media manager, but keywords are keywords, right? There's no, oh, a keyword in Instagram is a totally different beast than a keyword in Google. People are probably typing in about the same thing, right? Like if someone is looking for Squarespace design inspiration and they type it into Google and they turn around and type it into Instagram, like there's no logical reason why they would use completely different phrasing on Instagram. That's just not how we humans work. We're pretty basic. And so I do think there can be some value if that's where your folks are. I know some people who do really well with TikTok with that, for example. I do think it is I always say start with the website. That is my own bias, but it's a bias that comes from many, many years of experience. And that being that you have much more control over that than you do especially the Meta algorithms. So I think LinkedIn is quietly almost worse than Meta. That's my hot take for the day. But I do think there is value in that. And I have seen this is a little word of warning though, because this is a really interesting problem I encountered. I had a client, and I don't know if this is a one-time thing, but it was a Squarespace site, and it really freaked me out, to be quite honest. And it takes a lot to freak me out. They had a big Instagram feed on the bottom of their website, and beautiful photos, very well optimized captions and hashtags, the whole deal. Because they had an awesome in-house full-time social media manager who was killing it on Instagram. So of course, like we want to highlight this beautiful Instagram feed that's actually full of information. Well, here's something that is interesting. Google started pulling, because when you pull those that social media feed into Squarespace, Google started pulling those captions from the social media feed from Instagram into the meta description for the pages because they were so well optimized. It was wild. Like it took me, I was like, where are these coming from? And it kind of sucked, to be quite honest. We did compromise and kind of change around where that Instagram feed was displayed. It ended up putting it just on 2 pages. And like did a lot of like recrawl in Google Search Console, because like you're not going to get click-throughs if someone sees the preview in Google and it looks crazy, like about random, what would appear to be random stuff. So that's just something, if you are really good at optimizing for Instagram, just be cautious with importing those social media feeds, because the actual content of the post, this is what I never understood. The actual content of those posts are actually pulled into your page as content on the page. I didn't know that. I guess I just never thought about it. So that is something to keep in mind, is that if you're really good at it, you can actually kind of screw up your site SEO, which is fun. My job is really fun sometimes because I feel a little bit like a detective. I will say, like, ooh, why is this weird thing happening? And I had this happen just a couple weeks ago. I was like, why is this one page on this client site refusing to index in Google Search Console? And I just kept resubmitting and like tweaking the copy, wouldn't index. I ended up changing the URL, redirecting it, and then it indexed. I actually can't tell you why it would never index with the original URL. But it's like, at least now it's indexed. Before it was invisible. It was her about page. So like that's a huge problem. About pages are super. This is another one of my pro tips. Please have a high quality about page. And I'm talking like bio, any credentials you may have, like the whole deal. Please have it. Google is obsessed with about pages right now. Okay. Like this has been escalating over the last few years. This has to be related to the rise in actually fake websites. It's that are written by not real people. They want to see authorship, which is a technical term inside Google. Who is the individual who wrote this thing? There's a whole lot going on with about pages. I dropped a link about that as well, because it is so mission critical. Please, like, I know the business coaches and stuff are telling you to turn your about page into a sales page. Do not do it. You can talk about your methodology. You can talk about your history. You can talk about your values. You can talk about so many things that will quietly sell you to people who land on those pages without turning it into a item that is not actually about you or your company. There's a reason why big companies, if you go look at big companies about pages, they actually have a high quality page about their company. Like, those companies don't do things, well, sometimes they do, but generally on their website, they're not doing things just for funsies, because it's costing them like a lot of money for one page. So just please. And again, this is where Squarespace has some really nice advantages, because it's easy for you to add like anchor links. It's easy for you to add team pages. Like if you have a team, have a team page with bios of your team. All of that will help your visibility, because it proves that there are real people behind the company. There is such an advantage to doing that. It is so, so, so important. And I actually believe that as we see the rise of generative AI tools and the increase in fake websites, because the fake website epidemic is bad already and it's going to get worse, we're going to see even more of this issue. This is some inside baseball stuff for the designers out there, but I've actually been putting author schema on about pages. That's a kind of code that says, hey, this is who this person is. Here's the other properties that they are associated with them. So the LinkedIn profile, their YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. And I have seen some visibility improvements. There's a little bit of an experiment to see if it helps because of this issue. I have seen actually what are called author panels popping up in Google as a result of that. So that's exciting. So I think we're going to see this down the line. I'm always I'm looking 2 or 3 years down the line. I think we're going to see this become a huge, huge issue. I think there's going to be it's going to be an interesting ride in the website world for the next few years, I think. I don't know if it's just me. I feel like, Alyssa, you might have a few thoughts on that as well. Anyway, let me check the questions. Any other questions, folks? I would love to answer them. And we are here because I do have my Squarespace SEO course is back open. I was going to open it this summer, did not, because we had to do so many little wacky updates, like tiny ones. And I was like, this is actually kind of funny. This is because it was just like, there was nothing huge that changed, but tiny things that changed. I mean, sometimes it's like the bigger things are sort of easier because you can just delete a section and just add a new one. So that wasn't interesting, but it is open until October 28th, I think, is when it's programmed to close. This is my sign language for close. And so no rush if you're not sure if it's the right thing for you. Just FYI, I do a live session after the doors close. I kind of look at the time zones that people are in. For example, we had quite a few people from Australia last time, so try to accommodate where people are at in terms of setting up a live Q&A session, probably about 30 days after the course closes. So it'd probably be the first week in December, so that people can ask questions. There are going to be changes in the new year. The format is going to be changing a bit, because what I realize is people do need more support. So we're going to be adding in regular sessions with me for people who are in that course. I've not fully worked out the details, so please don't go quoting me on that, but just FYI. So if the format does change, everyone who has the course now will just get sort of legacied into the new format. I don't be like, haha, you can't access that because you were an original buyer. Like, that's weird. And so that is also something that's going to change, because I do want to, what I realized is about 85% of the people who have bought the course are designers. So folks have questions about their clients, and I want to be able to help support folks in that. So we're going to make that change. And in terms of some of the fun new stuff, there's going to be, let me see. I got to pull this up. One of the biggies that I have added in there is actually about dealing with the SEO AIO panel in Squarespace. Again, this is some inside baseball stuff. For those of you who are not web designers, you can just be like, okay, Sarah, I don't even care. That panel is actually the kind of thing that can cause your client some alarm. And so definitely there's a discussion of that. That's the biggie in terms of new stuff. I'm also, one of the things that has a little bit more of an expansion is the no indexing and the no follows. There's some little code cheats for the no follows, that kind of thing that I've added. So there's also some pretty new graphics, and I just am super excited about them. FYI, there are pretty new graphics inside the course as well. I'm very excited about them. We've got to go in and add them to the rest of the courses as well. So those are the biggies. And I'm going to just drop the link. And if you have any specific questions about, is this right for me? I am accessible via email. I am super responsive. I do my very best. If I don't reply to you, it's probably because it's a Friday. And I'm really trying to not be in my inbox on Fridays. But I do my very best to get back to people as quickly as I possibly can. Because I do think, people have questions. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll make you a quick Loom video in response, because it's easier for me to talk through, what I hear in your question and what I think might be the actual question. Also, sometimes I like to do a screen share and be like, so this is what we have about this. Does this sound like what you're looking for? So please reach out to me if that is something you are interested in. Like I said, it's open till October 28th. And then I may reopen it for like a day or two in the winter if I have the mental bandwidth for it. Otherwise, it won't be open again until the new year with a tweaked format. So that is the rundown. See, I'm getting better at remembering to do my pitch. Remember to do your pitches, you all. If you do live stuff, don't forget to mention you have things, because I don't know about you. I just like talking to people about my thing. And so sometimes I'm like, I totally forget. So I now have a post-it up that reminds me. With all that said, are there any last minute questions? No? Oh, hold on. Just got to do the thing. Do you think this is a very good fit for very experienced designers? Alyssa, this is one of the things where I would say, you should email me and we can talk about it, because I can send you a Loom kind of talking through what's there. If you feel super confident in one of the things that I see a lot of designers don't, so I'm going to actually rewind. If you are sitting there and doing content planning for your clients, thinking about the impact of SEO and that kind of thing, if you're mapping out the pages and being like, okay, it looks like this site is weighted towards X search concept, does this feel right? Then I'm going to tell you, you're probably like at a really good level. And you probably don't need the course. If you have not gotten in the practice of doing that, and that's something you want to do, particularly to up the value of your projects. Because this is something I was a web designer for a million years. I still design like a couple websites. I've done 3 this year. I don't advertise it. It's past clients. And one of the things I think is really difficult for solo designers and small agencies is the communicating the value. And because a lot of the stuff we do is pretty instinctive, it's like, of course I map out what the priorities are. And so if you want to kind of, again, be working towards adding the value, because I know that's something that you feel really passionately about, because I've known you for a really long time, and you're not doing that kind of process. And again, I can send you a personalized message if you send me an email. That would be where I could see it being beneficial to you. This is not a basic course. So if you are at a point where you're like, I don't know what a keyword is, please go to the Squarespace help docs and learn what like an SEO title is. That's the kind of thing that we're not covering, because there's a lot of free resources out there. I may add it at some point, but it is not a basic course. And I will say I have had some pretty advanced, experienced designers take the course and learn things, particularly in the sort of the content mapping exercise, which is a pretty sophisticated thing. And in the Nofollow, like all of that architecture around, that's another one that I definitely have seen even the experienced designers were unaware of. So those are the biggies. Alrighty, you all. It has been a pleasure. Thank you for stopping by. I love chatting about this stuff. I used to do like these live things every month. I keep thinking I should do it again just because it's so fun. And so thank you for coming. Like I said, I'm super accessible. If you want to reach me, Sarah with an H at Sarah with an H, moon like the sky, .net, that's .net, or .com works too. So choose your favorite. And I'll get back to you just as soon as I possibly can. This recording will be up for a little while, probably a few weeks. So if you want to come back and take a look at it, you can also do that. All right, everyone, take care.